I sometimes try to come up with a bit of an intro, but somehow even today I'm at a loss for words because out there it's just a shit show. War is being exploited for, you almost have to say, just to boost one's own profile. Yesterday, first thing in the morning, the oil price was at $120. Then it dumped after it was announced that the states would tap into their oil reserves. In the evening, it keeps dumping because Trump said the war will soon be over. Meanwhile, Iran is bombing in Bahrain, attacking more oil fields, attacking more tankers. Now, in the morning, Iran comes out and says, hey, listen, if you expel the diplomats from the USA and Israel, then you'll be allowed to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. And next week, the Strait of Hormuz will be called the Strait of Trump, or just the Strait from who knows what. And with that, welcome to a new episode of Shit Show. And also, market is watching, and like I said, I'm slowly running out of words. It's just an absolute shit show at this point. Bitcoin at 70,000 US dollars. Yes, Bitcoin at 70,000 US dollars. Isn't that nice? Isn't it wonderful that we finally, once again, see Bitcoin at 70,000 US dollars? I don't know either. Yes, Bitcoin at 70,000 US dollars. The liquidity is fantastic. Well, no, not at all. We see nothing in the spot order book. We don't see any significant good news, except for a possible de-escalation initiated by the USA, which Iran knows nothing about, as Iran continues to send bombs, just as the USA continues to send bombs over there. But apparently everything is de-escalated. And the oil price, where is it at now? At about, where do we have it? Well, crude oil is back at $90. Anyway, I'd say let's get started right away. But before we dive in, as always, feel free to give the video a like. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet. And of course, you're also very welcome to join the free Telegram Talk and Signal group. If you're interested in updates, news, and signals, feel free to join. You can find the link for that for free down in the video description. And if you're still looking for an exchange where you can trade all this crazy stuff, including gold, oil, and whatever else, then feel free to check out my partner. You can sign up on the exchange bingings. There you'll find everything you need to be able to trade Trump and somehow profit from all the craziness. So feel free to sign up. The link is down in the video description. So Bitcoin at 70,000 US dollars. Let's quickly sum that up again. So yesterday evening, Trump stands up and says, yeah, the war won't last much longer. We're definitely ahead of schedule and Iraq will soon surrender. While 10 minutes later, Iran comes out and says, yes, we're ready for 10 years of war. Okay, and now the oil prices again, let's just take a quick peek and have a look at that. Back at $89. Last night we were already back at $91, $92. We had this massive sell-off, filled the gap. That was the news from Trump. Now we're seeing another rebound. Okay, so basically to sum it all up, nothing has changed. That's why we can fully focus on the markets again. And that of course means stocks rise, all falls on Trump's Iran war remarks. So it's still a topic everywhere, so there's really no need for us we shouldn't think that the topic is now completely off the table and things like that. The focus is still entirely on the Iran war, or rather still on the oil price, so that's a given. We have to keep an eye on it because of course it also brings inflation concerns, etc., and so on. Of course too. But of course we mustn't forget the other things. And there's AI stress and credit cracks all at once. And inflation in the labor market. And by the way, inflation data will be released on Wednesday. So as you can see, everything is happening all at once now. And technically speaking, or rather compared to yesterday, not much has really changed. The volatility index has, for the first time in a long while, spiked sharply upwards again. Spiked. But if we look at it now at the current level, we're at 23. For me, that's still not a sign of relief. Not at all. We'll get back to that in a moment, but given how the markets are right now, okay, maybe it could still pump up towards $71,000 or $72,000 because we still have a vector up there. The high ABR is up there, but at the moment, I don't see anything more than that. Even if we just look at the volume, it just simply the liquidity clusters. Sure, we still have one at 74,000 and one at 65,000, but apart from that, the liquidity just isn't there. The uncertainty is extreme, which means we have no liquidity. Let's switch to the monthly, so one time frame higher, and take a look at the setup there. Of course, we'll remove the small and big ones again. There we basically see the same picture, except that we're still heading towards 60 to 62,000 or even 55 to 53,000. That's where most of the liquidity lies, at least on the larger time frames. But the problem with this whole thing is that there actually isn't any liquidity at all. This is the spot order book. We're still only in the 10 million range. Sales have now even increased significantly again towards 20 million, but we have no volume in the market. That's the big problem. We really need a volume spike, a sustainable breakout, but I don't see that happening at the moment. And that also has to do with the fact that if we take a look at government bonds, which, although they've seen a slight pullback since last night, are still at a very, very high, they're simply at a high level. The 20-year, the 30-year bonds, they're all at an extremely high level. And Japan, it's the same story there. In the end, government bonds are also rising there again. And I'll just mention right away here as well, the dollar is still in a territory that should also become interesting for carry trades or even for an intervention. That means the problem right now is simply that the risks remain extremely high. So nothing has changed regarding the risks. There are not fewer risks. In my opinion, there are just as many or even more risks. But these have not yet erupted in the markets. That's why the volatility index is still so high. That's why the stock markets are still so high, and we'll get to that in the second part of the video. It's simply a complete news-driven shit show until some domino is ready to fall, and then not even a Donald Trump with his speeches or whatever, because he likes to hear himself talk, can change anything anymore. And then we fall back into the pattern where everything really comes down to analysis, or rather purely to macro sentiment. And we just don't see that at the moment because it's simply a range. Let's be honest, it's a range. The market currently has zero liquidity, zero interest in crypto or anything else. It doesn't make any sense. And we're basically seeing the same thing with the altcoins. Nothing is happening there, really nothing at all. There are exceptions like Hyperliquid, where there's a bit of a pump. But apart from that, the market is really just nailed down because from a macroeconomic perspective, we're absolutely bearish and not getting any fresh liquidity. The next interest rate cut will probably only happen in September if things continue like this and nothing really eases up. And just because the oil price has now dropped to $90 per barrel, that does not mean there is any relief because that is still very, very high. And the risks are still not gone. That's why, as far as the primary thing is concerned, my stance remains downwards. Go for it today towards 72K. But remember what happened last week, for example. Back then, we also pumped on Monday in the end. And on Tuesday, the reversal came. So just stay cautious. Otherwise, let's take a quick look at the traditional markets. Gold continuing to pump is still, for me, an indicator that we simply have extreme uncertainty in the markets. If gold doesn't correct, we won't get any interest rate cuts. And why isn't gold falling if everything is supposedly great again now? I mean really great because the Strait of Hormuz is supposedly going to be open again soon and the war is supposedly almost over. So why is gold still pumping? It just doesn't make any sense at all. Just like silver, which is still standing so stable or has even risen again, it doesn't make any sense. Why is the dollar still like this? Stable if everything is supposedly clear and everything is fine? The dollar rises in times of crisis. We are absolutely still in a crisis. And the dollar at 100 is the perfect zone for intervention by Japan. They can raise interest rates now, and I also reposted this for you here. Where is it? They're sitting on 1.2 trillion in US debt and still have 6.5 trillion in the carry trade. Simply, or trillion. Billions or trillions, it doesn't matter. Is it a huge damn amount? A huge sum that's still just sitting in the carry trade? So you see, the markets are ultimately not calm. They're just waiting for the next new drivers, or rather the next news, which will then briefly set the next direction for us before they realize again, damn, somehow things are still a mess. USDJPY is absolutely an intervention and in the risk zone. Let's wait and see. Let's move over to the traditional markets. What does it look like there? The DAX had a catastrophic day yesterday, really catastrophic. If you're still in the short position, we're now right in the middle of the support. So that would be the alternative now. We've dropped more sharply than I would have thought, but all right. Once again, take profit and then wait and see. As I told you last week, we could close the long position, or rather it was up here where we had this brief re-break that we could close it. We can see that Europe is currently being sold off much more heavily because Europe is much more dependent, of course, also on the whole gas and oil situation. And naturally, that has already cost the DAX about 10% at the start of the year. I would really like to see something like that or something similar happen in the US markets as well. But as you can see for yourselves, the Dow Jones did continue its sell-off yesterday, but then rebounded again. And that's what we always see. Sell-off, rebound, and always in the same patterns. Fantastic, unbelievable, but the support is holding the volume. Still below average, catastrophic. The support is holding the range. S&P 500 negative possible retest of our range, or rather our cluster. We need to keep an eye on that. At the moment, I'm not convinced yet. Not so convinced that everything will turn out well. And as I said, the volatility index is still at a high level. It's clear that a volatility index doesn't stay up here for days at this level. But to me, it still looks like, okay, always these quick hedging phases over and over again. And that the big event is still kind of just around the corner. But otherwise, the stock markets, if we take a quick look at Microsoft, it looks stable. Nvidia still looks terrible or modest. Coinbase has performed well in recent weeks. Alphabet. Yeah, in the end, everything still actually looks good. Both dips in the stock markets are possible, but I still just don't have a good feeling about it. Government bonds are too high for me. The dollar is too high for me, and there are crises everywhere. I think Oracle is supposed to, if I'm not mistaken, I don't have Oracle on my list here, possibly still report numbers today, I think earnings, and they want to lay off 20,000 to 30,000 people anyway. So let the shit show continue. Seriously. But all right, let's wait and see. As long as Bitcoin keeps churning along. In the end, everything is just screaming for further escalation, not de-escalation. We should still keep a bit of focus on the oil price. And Bitcoin is just doing its usual Bitcoin things. And with that, that's it from my side. Thank you for watching. We'll hear from each other again tomorrow for another episode. The shit show goes on. And tonight at 7 p.m., there's a live stream. So I would be really happy if you join in. We'll go over everything again calmly, of course, including your altcoin requests. And otherwise, I'd say that's it from my side. Thank you for watching. Feel free to give the video a like, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and then we'll hear from each other again tonight. Until then, ciao ciao, and as always, stay creepy.